Hey guys, how you doing? Okay, let's get on to this. Alright, this is a game between, this is the U.S. Chess Championship. This is, Ray Robinson versus, Fabiano. Ray's white and Fabi's black. So, hold on. So, we have to just, I'm gonna flip the board and we'll do Fabi's, side. It was a really interesting, and then we're also from the women's side of the game. We're doing Annie Wang versus Dorso. Sorry, let me do it. Dorsa. And okay, but we're gonna do this one first because it had a really good end game, and I wanted to do that one. Okay. Robinson Ray went e4, Fabi went e5, knight f3, knight f6, the Petrov defense. Knight takes e5, d6, f3, knight f3, pawn takes, and then knight c3. This is the Ninovich attack. It's an interesting maneuver. You takes, and then you go e7. It actually helps whites. It's a slight equalizing for white. I mean black. Sorry, not white. Let me say, give me a drink, Herlin. And so what happens is the bishop usually comes out. I really haven't played this before. It's kind of a it's not really played. I've never played it, so maybe it's been played in higher levels, but it's really odd. You don't usually take away from the center. Usually, in principle, you take towards the center. So this is really different for sure. So, and that's why I kind of picked it. Was it's it's how Fabi handled it that was really cool. He noticed the ability for the aggression in the center, and he never let go of that aggression on Ray after this move here. So it's like on move D takes C, and after this it was like totally the grip was starting to be, the press was starting to be tightened. It just got tightened until Ray lost. E4, E6, I mean E3, sorry, E7, E3, bishops. Castle, bishop D2, and Ray wants to castle queenside to start flinging the pawns up the board. Knight D2, D7. Sorry, I'm used to playing from white side. Ray castle queenside, C6, and so now the C6 has a dual purpose. The first purpose is the queen's going to be able to come out to A5. Second purpose is if the knight ever thought about coming into these points, it's impossible now because it's the pawn take. It also prepares D5 if need be. It also prepares B5 if need be. And as odd as it seems, it prepares A5 then B5 push, and it also allows for the knight so it doesn't have to hold onto this square here, so the knight can actually, it doesn't have to go like to something like here to guard that. It's already guarded by the base pawn. So a multitude of ideas. That's what the supers do, is they're able to take one idea and make it have a multi-purpose. So Ray sees the potential for queen e5 and does a prophylactic move king b2. Sorry, king b1. It makes the king a little more safe along here. But it also does, Fabi does bring about one of his ideas. He doesn't want to do that, and he doesn't want to do that, because that's silly. Why not stake claim in the center with d5? And so he does that. Ray goes c4, and then Fabi goes knight b6. Excuse me. And the reason that is he wants to. Oh, come on, respond. Don't be negative. Come on, computer. Sometimes my computer is very obstinate, which I think you guys know what that means. Very not flexible. Okay. C takes D and then knight takes D. Now, Fabi's ready to actually give up a knight for the dark square bishop because the center is open. Oops, sorry. This is the center. If there's pawns here, that's usually like here, 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 here. That means the center is closed. But because it's open, there's more dynamic play, and if Fabi can trade off the dark squared bishop, bishops are high achievers, as you would say, in open games. So Ray goes c4. Then Fabi goes bishop. I don't know. I may have at this point, I know it sounds odd, I might have actually taken here and then takes here, 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 and then there, and then have provoked Ray to have a isolated pawn that I could actually take scope on. But I like to see that. One thing I do like is endgame. So potentially you can play bishop here. If rook plays there, you play your other bishop here. If bishop comes back, then you retreat. You can retreat your bishop, and if pawn gets pushed, you can retreat back. You don't want to give up your bishops, so you kind of have to endure this. And if he plays there, rook takes, and then what you'd have to do at this point is play king f8, and like something like knight. And I don't know if at this moment white has really any advantage, so maybe it was a wise decision for Fabi not to go down this path. But you do have a potential bit there, and I believe the rook is trapped, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the rook's trapped. So it'd have to give itself up for yeah. So actually, it might be beneficial to have gone down that route. Let's just take a look to see. Come on, turn on the engine. Let's see if we have any advantage here. Okay. And so yeah, we do have an advantage, so we are winning. But Fabi didn't want to go down that path, so he went knight takes d5, c4, bishop f5, bishop takes d5. Wow. I was kind of shocked at this point. Ray willingly surrendered his light squared bishop. It's funny. It says the computer says that Ray has an advantage because of the potential winning of a pawn. But if you think about it, a pawn, excuse me, isn't everything. It's, remember, the whole thing is checkmate. And so Fabi he did surrender a pawn for the 2 bishop advantage, and it's actually, if you think about it, it's not a 1 pawn advantage for white. It's a 0.2. So Ray really didn't get any compensation for that. HE1. Ray is a really good player, but he has one sitch that we all need to work on. He needs to work on time management, because what happens is he plays stellar like until a certain part of the game, then he gets so low in time he plays on the increments, and you can't think deep. You think very topical. You don't have enough time because basically you're into the you have like 12 seconds left, then you got to play, otherwise you'd run out of time. And it doesn't give you enough time for a plan, and when you get to critical parts you need that time. And I believe it was Andrew Martin, he has one on how to manage time. And so what you have to do is leave yourself a certain amount of time, because when they get to move 40 they actually get more time. So he says that when you get to an end game you should leave yourself at least a minute to 2 minutes per end game move. So if it's going to take you, let's say 15 minutes to get to so you're in an end game and it's going to take you 15 moves, you should either have at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes available for you to think, because endgame is really important. And Ray Robinson's an excellent player, but time problem is his sitch. It's same with a lot of great grandmasters. They have time issues, and when you can fix the time issue problem, you'll be able to outplay your opponent because you'll have more time to think. And that's why I have a game from Annie Wong. Is that she knows how to manage. She used to have, she said that her coach taught to her, because she would get into time problems like Ray, and she would lose games that she was ahead because of time. She'd get flustered and upset and nervous, and she would make a inferior move, maybe not a blunder, but an inferior move to what would actually be a winning combo, and she'd either lose on time or on the position. And so she's fixed that in this tournament, and it's really helped her with winning the games, because her opponents get into time trouble. They're playing on the increments when she has 10 plus minutes on the clock, and you get 30 seconds. I know every move, but there's something when you get down to 10 to 9 seconds, under 10 seconds, you start getting flustered, and then you move, and then you're not really thinking deeply. Okay, so let's get into this. C3, pawn C3, rook E5, queen B3, A6. Now Fabi's trying to excuse me, get B5 into play and potentially start hacking at the queen side. Bishop F4, and Fabi went rook takes e1, rook takes e1, and then queen d7. This move is really a critical move in the position. It was the move that really kind of brought everything together. Excuse me. One second, I'm going to get a drink. And so Ray went e5, rook e8, and he can't take because, of course, you see that mate 2. So the only way to cement the bishop is with f4. d8 was played, and that actually takes scope on c7. That's a potential idea, but the problem is this is a weakness here. So what you'd want to do is first get in b5 and then go bishop c7, because you're then taking scope on this bishop can't really take anything, and potentially I missed actually the idea is actually bishop f not bishop, pawn f6 wins the bishop on the spot. So a4 was played, and sorry, I did it again. I should have remembered there's a pin. Ray's not going to play a game that he's going to lose a piece. So a4 was played. H6, and potentially now the king could actually go to h8 or h7, and then play f the f pawn push onto f6. Rook d1, bishop g. Now Fabi sees that there's a weakness here and there's a weakness there, so the only move to hold the position is rook d2, b5, which this move here, b5, really did basically a problem to Ray's position, because he actually took, and you kind of have to take, but when you take, you have a sitch. This right here is a potential checkmate. So if this bishop, let's say, was gone and it was black to move, that would be check, and the only way that Ray would be able to stop check would either be queen a2 or a3, and the rook would win the queen. Ray played queen d1, which this actually is, whoa, it says that's best. What if he okay, I see why. It's taking advantage of the rook, so that actually has to be played. The bishop actually comes back there, king comes up, rook comes over, and I think Ray would actually be able to hold this position if he had played that way. But he retreats back, which he's trying to trade off the queens, and Fabi's like, not going to happen, because I have an idea of queen d7, and now this checkmate is for real, and there'd be checkmate if Ray didn't guard. It'd be checkmate in 2. So he actually played f5, which looks like it holds the position, but in reality it allows the rook to be under fire. And so the pawn would have to take the bishop, rook would take, bishop would take rook, and then I think the queen would actually have to take here, and then the rook takes. And it's like, oh, and then you take there, queen takes, and Fabi would be up in exchange, and that'd be enough to put away the game. It wouldn't matter who his opponent was; he'd be able to put the player away. So d3 is played. F takes, and then now that this was the critical point of the game. That move, he played bishop g3, and the only move to kind of hold the position at all is queen d2. That's it. You have to be able to it's funny, you have to block this almost. It guards this point here, so if he tried to maybe play something like that, he can't infiltrate in, so the only move that would be plausible would be here. So it's a hard position already, so he moves back, and Fabi just cements his position. First he checks, and Ray has to move into a pin. And then of course we know what to do. You attack a pin piece. King comes to c7. Sorry, it's not c7, c2. And then of course, what do we do, guys? We play b4, and if pawn takes b4, then you basically have a pretty devastating check, and the king has to move. Or let's see, b4 is, and if let's say he doesn't do anything, he'll get b3, king takes b3, and then you actually win a rook, and so you'll be up a whole rook to a bishop endgame. C takes, and then rook slides over. King has to go to b3. b3 is actually a mistake. This is the only move that saves, and the problem is you kind of lose a queen at this point here, and it's game over at that point, because now you're threatening mate, a potential check, and you're threatening the rook, and so he checks there, and d5, e6 is played. Rook d5, rook d8. Now this pin is a big time. He can't come here because of queen c6, which wins a piece on the spot. Queen c6 wins, because he can't come here, of course, because of that, and he loses the queen. So he has to go back to c6. b3, and then rook takes, and the game's over at this point. Ray played d, and then queen took, and it's actually, I believe he resigned here. He resigned at this point. He didn't want to see anymore. It was just not fun, let's just say. Potentially he could play there, but then in comes that, and then he has to move there, and then you just snap the queen off, and it's game over. But we're going to go over Annie Wang's game. She's white, and her opponent Dorsa played as black, and it got to a really interesting endgame. And the reason I want to bring this game up is how she used her endgame advantage, pawn movements, and the structure to win. Okay, Annie went d4. Dorsa went knight f6, e4, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2. It's kind of, let's turn on the engine real quick and take a look. So it's pattern orientated. A6 actually helps black. So proper play is bishop g5 because you're taking scope on this. Then the bishop would basically have to go back, and then you develop a piece. And so black loses a tempo, and what you get is the development of the knight to f3. So, but a3 is played, bishop takes, and queen takes, b6, bishop g5. So if something like this happened, you have that, and then you have here, and you come back, and Annie actually wins a pawn in this position. And she retreats her bishop, she'd retreat her bishop out, and she'd be safe. Up a pawn, a whole pawn. So h6 was played. Keeping scope on the queen is huge. Bishop a6. What she played was correct. Bishop, e3. That protects that. Also, she's preparing to go b5, a4, a5, and kind of lock the center, lock the wing down and attack. d5 was played. Knight f3, bd7. And the computer has a couple choices that it wants to make. Potentially that's an idea, and then she would actually take here, and then pawn would take after the rook takes. Pawn would take back, and the only ability Annie would have is actually castling queenside, so she doesn't want to risk that. So she actually plays bishop d3, which helps black out. If Dorsa would have played this move here, it's an interesting move for sure. The bishop has to take, the bishop takes, queen takes, and potentially c5, then castles, takes, and takes here. So, but that's kind of hard to see over the board, so I don't blame her for not doing that 100% on that one. C takes d, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, knight c5, and then e2, queen e2. And she actually plays a very interesting move, which was g5, which I was surprised a little bit on, because it does remove the pin, I understand, but at what cost does it remove the pin? And that's the sitch in Dorsa's position. Is her position is there's a lot of air, as Josh Waitzkins talks about in a lot of his lessons, that you don't really want to leave that much air around the king, because that's a place for knight to come in. That's a weakness now. And potentially this, if a bishop got here, would potentially be a weakness. Here would be a weakness. Boy, potentially even there, if a queen got here and that pawn was pushed, would be a weakness. So just a little too I would say let me see what would be a good word, a definite of a move, which I don't think I'm not saying it right, but it's to you once a pawn gets pushed, it can't go back. I'll just say that. And so now this pawn can't go back there, and now it's a target. And if taken, that now this whole open file is ripe for the pluckins. So she did castle, which was correct. I would have castled too, because the one thing you want to do when your opponent gives you a position similar to this, get castled so that you can then play f4 and pry open the center or the king side. And Dorsa gave Annie an ability to do that by going g5. It does break the pin, but like I said, at what cost? That's the whole sitch. At what cost? Knight f3, and she plays that rook. So that's actually okay. So this rook here is best. Makes sense though, because I can see why you'd want to keep your rook on f1 for the push of f4. So Dorsa would take with the knight, and then the pawn would take back, and now you have that for scope, and potentially h4. So it's interesting. White still has a slight edge, but not any kind of with moving her rook did away with the ability for that take. So now if that's taken, she'd have to take towards the center, and I don't know if that gives a file for the entry point of Dorsa's rook and queen, potentially, you know, here and down here, if that opens up. You know, it just, every move has a drawback, so just try to make your moves not so drawback in this. Rook D is 8. The rook comes over AC1, bishop takes, H takes, and B5, B3, knight takes, and then queen takes. And at this point, I'm kind of a little puzzled at that move. I kind of would have agreed slightly with the computer in this line, but this would not be fun to have dropped right in your face. That's not fun, let's just say. And then if that's played, you just snap off a pawn. So I think that white's better, so I kind of get what Dorsa's idea is to maybe get a pair of rooks off the board, and Annie obliges with that. Rook takes, queen h5. Now the king's forced to actually come up the board, and then rook goes to d7. Rook, Dorsa's rook has to actually now come back to defend. There's really another way of defense, but I don't really like it. That's a way of defending, but then now this is a big time threat, so that's actually not good. So that's really the only move to hold Dorsa's position is rook f8. But now, if you notice, her pieces are starting to be more passive, and Annie's are becoming more active, and that's what you want in an endgame. So Annie goes e2, which queen e2. Hey, how you doing? And this is actually more correct, because if that happens, then you can actually come in with an attack like that. And yes, even if hey, how you doing? Even if Dorsa gets these two passers, Annie's threat of the queen and rook is just too much for that. But I see she wants to hold on to her structure, and that is interesting. A5 was played by Dorsa. Queen D2, Queen C4, and then now Annie's going after the structure. What we're doing is we're doing from the women's championship. Annie Wong actually played a game against Dorsa, and it had a really good end game. And I wanted to show you guys how Annie handled the end game, and it was really good, let's just say. And so it's important to go over endgame. Queen D5, C5, B4, A takes B, A takes B, and Queen E5, and then the Annie took. What happens if you actually play here, though? Okay, taking's the only way. Okay. C6. Yeah. And this actually, King H2 handles a lot of the problems of this check here with Doris's check. And if you notice, Annie's up one whole pawn. So, and this is a pass pawn. So I like Annie's position in this because that's going to be a weakness. If these pieces get traded off, this king's going to have to travel all the way over there to grab that pawn. And while that's gone, the king will nicely, subtly walk in and say thank you, like Pac-Man, and gobble everything up, and these pawns will protect themselves. And it's like, I don't think the black king would approve of that. So, but she goes C6, and if Dorsa checks, if she did, the rook would just drop back and takes, and then you can actually come up with a check here, and the pawn will end up becoming protected and a problem for black, because this king's safe and the black king isn't. White's king is safe, black's king isn't. So Annie could basically move her queen around without any severe mating ideas or king under an attack. So this trade right here, in my opinion, of queens was actually the losing move. That's just my opinion, because you want to keep the queens on board when you're down a pawn. You don't really want to trade down when you're down a pawn, especially a pawn this far away from your king. There's really, you want to keep it a major piece endgame. You don't want to go down to a minor piece endgame. I guess it's a semi-major, but I usually call major ones when you have a queen or and a rook. They're considered major pieces, I guess. But what happened is the check comes in there and takes, and now let's take scope of this position here. Our stock, as they say, which means inventory. Of course, you guys know all that. After all the trade and all the smoke and all the battling and hit, pieces punching each other, smacking each other. Annie comes up a pawn ahead, a very powerful pawn ahead, because it's farther away from the enemy king. Doris did get to trade off the queens, but at the cost of weakening her pawn. So now Annie has a majority. There is, you would say though, wait, doesn't Doris have a candidate pawn potential? Not really, because these two pawns will actually prevent that pawn from coming down the board. So I would say that if there was just one pawn and not doubled like this with that protection, I would say that she has a slightly equal position, but because these pawns are like this, her position is slightly worse. It's actually a little bit worse. It would be equal if that pawn wasn't like that. It would be equal. If this pawn was gone, the position would be considered equal, because each side would have a potential to get a pass pawn, but Annie would still be better because of her outside pass pawn. It's not truly an outside, because it would have to be on like a5 for that, or h5 would be along this file. That's a true outside. I'd call this maybe a semi-outside. So, but it's far enough to cause this king and this rook a problem, let's just say. So rook c5 was played, rook a2, f4, which I like actually. I can see the problem here, but remember, every pawn that comes off the board makes this pawn even greater of a fighter, because it can start going down the board. Annie can use this to deflect this rook away and bring the king up and maybe take all this. And potentially maybe the king has to come over, the rook has to come over, and the rook, let's say this pawn got here, the black rook was here, Annie's rook was here, we'll say the king is here. If Annie played rook takes, king takes, let's see, how many moves does Annie have for the king to come back? Let's see, 1, it's be her turn, 2, 3, 4, there goes one pawn, and 5. So Annie would be still up a pawn, and this is a pretty solid pawn structure. So she'd probably be still one pawn up. G takes, and she takes, and she's okay with that, because now we're getting into our endgame play. Doris actually should have had brought her king in, because we have to remember that kings are important, and the closer her king get Doris, the higher chance of a draw it will become. She played rook b3, which does have practical sense, but we have to remember that it would take Annie 2 moves to get in behind it. So Doris could have used one of her moves, of the moves that would have taken Annie to get behind the pawn, to bring her king in and then bring the rook over. It took 2 moves take 2 moves for Annie, because right here and then over. Here, here, and then here. And so that's what should have been played. So keep that in mind when you guys are playing endgames, that your king is a fighter. That's when the king comes out. He's really mighty. If you think of in the medieval times, the king alone would be taken out, but he's been trained and he's a very good fighter. And so when he's one-on-one with just an average soldier, he's basically going to destroy the average soldier because of how fit he is and how properly trained and also healthy, if you want to think about it. That's kind of how I think of it, and it helped me get my king involved. G3, rook B2, check, king H3, rook B4, king G4, and she's going to stay a pawn ahead throughout the entire game, and then what's going to happen is this positive is just going to go extremely crazy. She plays some really good chess. Okay, rook B3 and king C5 was played, kind of passing the move. I was like, whoa. Because Annie's not really going to be able to snap that pawn off, because if she does, this rook grabs it. So the king has the potential to come over and potentially get in front of the pawn. And if the king can get here, it's stopped and potentially it's a draw. So H7 was played. King F5. It's really dangerous to get a this right here. She had to have seen this. This is kind of scary a little bit if you think about it, because what she's gonna do is trade off these pawns for a rook and allow Dorsa to actually have these two pawns. But it'd be really hard to be able to play that move, because you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, can't she just take that? Yeah, then you play up. And then if that's played, you play F6, and then trying to stop it. You actually at this point could play this pawn, and if it slides over, then you get in behind, and now that's going to fall. And you can now bring the king over, and it's fast enough. You push there, and the principle, this pawn locks this rook down, and now this this pawn will end up becoming, it'll go bye-bye. You can actually do that, but then if you push, it takes, and it's going to be a little tough to kind of make any progress here. Yeah, you're going to have to kind of come around that way. So the king gets brought over, and G4 is played. King E5, which looks like, can't she just do a check? Yes, but remember, the idea is getting this pawn up the board, and the rook has to trade its life for that. And then you wanna get your king in front of these two pawns with this rook, and you'll basically destroy the enemy king. So takes, B6 is played, rook takes, and then B7, king C6. This looks like it should work, but it allows that to kind of happen. And you have to be really careful now, because it looks like you can come over and actually snap that off. But now this pawn will actually promote, because what happens is this king shoulders everything away, and it'll actually be the protectorate of the soldier coming down the board. So takes, and so first of all, you have to bring your king in. Check. H. And in comes the pawns, and that's game over at this point. because if that's played, then you come up here and there's no way the king could hold these two pawns. So the king's gonna, the pawn has to move, then you take that. And you, if he comes up, then you take there. And of course, you guys know the standard main idea. Hold on, we'll turn this off. You can actually play here, here. It's a little longer. Yeah. Yeah, there, and then you just bring up, and you cut. He tries to come here, there. There's checkmate. That's what would have happened. Okay, so you have a game. Oh, pawns, yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I'll load this up, but just give me 1 second. Alright, let's do this thing. Okay, so con solid and con is black, so we gotta let's see here. Wow, he's trying to really put the squeeze on con, isn't he? f3, castles, knight f3. So it's, yeah. And so he's basically, he's more safe. Khan's more safe than his opponent. And this is when they, yeah, I know what you're talking about. This is the noose tightening here. b4, e5, knight takes, d takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and d2. Now this Khan knows that more likely black's going to castle queen kingside. So this is actually a pretty good setup for black to start kingside onslaught. b4, b3, knight f6, f4, and so he's trying to, yeah. What would you do? What do you think of the c6 sack? c6. Let me go back. Hold on. Hold on. We'll get to that point. About pushing c6. Oh, okay. After knight bd7. Oh, let me see. Okay, hold on. Oh, okay. Gotcha. What do you think about? Oh, I got what you're saying. Pawn push here. I don't really know. I'd probably say that, yeah. I know what you're saying. I got you now. I think at this point we'd be reacting to our opponent, and really we have to think about our moves, and if this really doesn't, for white instead of b4. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, we'll get rid of that then. Okay. Huh. Let me see here. Yeah. Well, I think, of course, we'd have to take. So you're going to have to take, because if he gives you a pawn, I'm more than happy to take it. And then you have queen to a4. And at that point, you'd have to play c5. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's wise to give up your I guess you could play there. Then you'd have to play here. I guess you could do a draw here. There is a draw. Oh, well, I gotcha. Gotcha. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So you're saying after this, is that a good move? Let's see, because I think I think we're still okay, because if he took here, I think that benefits us. So, it still benefits white, so I think taking's best. Yeah. So I think that okay, I don't think that's the best move because that allows for there. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm just thinking it it protects. It's weird. I know this sounds very odd. Now we can't take because of that. And we have a knight. We have a knight. True. We also will potentially lose a bishop here. So if we move up, knight takes, queen takes, then you have queen f6, f3, and there, 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 there. Now that's a weakness forever. Yeah, exactly. And then also at the very end, you'd have something like this, and I don't really think it's, yeah, I don't think it's very happy for for us. This actually is winning for us because if we play here, we have c5, and let's see. I think we're up like two. Yeah, we'd be up like 2 pawns. The queen would have to come back, and you really wouldn't want to take because this potentially could be if he take. We'll say we push here. We'll say we takes. Actually, we'd take with the knight, so we wouldn't take with the bishop because we'd lose that. And if he took here, bishop takes. Let's see here. Yeah, we're actually, this is crushing. Okay, bye bye. Have great sleep and be blessed. All right. So that's kind of why after that and that, it's not that this isn't good. It just allows, I believe, it's something like that, and then we'd lose our bishop. So, and this is our good bishop. Remember, in the French, we have to always keep in mind that this bishop is our sweet, our happy, the happiest piece we want to keep on the board, because this bishop is not very good because of this chain. It's blocked in, so we want to try to keep this bishop on board, the dark square one. So good. I'm glad you proposed that because that was an interesting idea about that. And now we figured out why he played b4, because that actually gives black an advantage. Takes, and then f5 is played, and now and you also could tell which side you're going to attack on by where your pawns are pointing. So we know for a fact that white's going to start an onslaught on the queen side. Yeah, good job. That's it. You know what? In the Caro-Kann, The dark squared bishop's good. In the French, the dark squared bishop is good. So those are the two kind of openings. Your dark squared bishop is really good. We'll have tactics just a second. We'll do at least one. We're kind of doing some of the a game real quick, and we'll just go over this really efficiently. Let's see here. And this is actually cool. Khan actually locked down where white's play is, so he neutralized white's play. Knight d5 was played, and now there's 2 points potentially here. And if that's traded off, and we have now an outpost. So, and the king's getting off this diagonal so that this pawn is free if that was to be traded off, if you can get another piece involved. H4. Boy, this white's going for a ginormous pawn attack. Wow. So, and now Khan just broke the queen side apart, so white has no play. All of white's counterplay has been destroyed basically, and so black's the only one with any chance of an advantage. B takes. Oh, sweet. You gotta love that. You gotta love it. Boom. That's and I gotta tell you guys, if you wanted to talk about tactics, this tactic right here is something called a fork or a pin, more of a pin, sorry. And it pinned the queen to the pawn, which then would attack the king. So there goes a pawn. King f2, d3, and if we notice, guys, what do we have here? We have something called a fork, or they call it a fork or a double attack. So if black's able to get, if white kind of has a moment of not keeping an eye, there you go. There's a tactic called a double attack or a fork. And then, uh-oh, now the queen's gone. So see you later. And then even if the king went back, you potentially now have two ideas, taking here or there. I'd probably take here. That's just me. Because then you have a fork, a pin, and an attack of a pawn. So that's just crushing. So rook d3, knight c4 must be played. It's a must. You could play rook here, but I don't know. I think he still loses because the rook would have to take, knight takes, and you're up a piece. Maybe better would actually be rook takes in this scenario, so that the knight's really forced to retreat to c4. And then potentially you could win a pawn here, another pawn. So it all depends on what black wants to do. He wants to, he sees the weakness, the knight's on pre, so what he decides to do is a better move, which is actually queen c7, which forks the knight and the pawn, and this pawn will fall because this knight has to be protected. Knight e, and so now the knight comes in here, so check, and when the queen takes, e3 is played, and there the queen's gone now. Knight takes, check. So he provoked the knight to come to stop there. By doing that, he issued something called a decoy. He decoyed the queen to, or deflected it, whatever you'd like to say. I think it's more of a decoy to the square on d2, and then he dropped e3 on it, which is a fork. And this knight that was here can't stop that anymore, so the queen will be lost for a rook, a knight, and a pawn. And there's enough compensation for black because the rook and queen are enough to take these. These two rooks aren't working together, and so the queen potentially has enough time to fork the king and rook. So knight d3, queen c6, rook hb1. Now we're getting interesting. There's a check. Pawn takes check. King c3. Queen takes a2. Man, black's just tearing white apart. b8. Queen a5. And then g3. And now there's no mating threats. This is a threat. That's a threat. And potentially later on, that pawn will fall, that rook will fall, and it's just going to be nothing but pain. Check. d3. Check. King d2. And then now we're having a and potentially then you can play here. If he comes there, you can come over with check. Now, I believe that is mate, if I'm not mistaken. And even if this happened and he came here, you still have a check. He'd have to come there, and then you have mate. So mate's gonna happen. King gets involved. And now we get to a good endgame. Okay. Okay, well, while we're waiting, we'll do a puzzle or two. Okay, let's do this. Okay, bishop from g3 to c7, triple attacking the knight. So they're trying to win a pawn, which would give white an advantage. Trying to see if knight to c4 isn't an idea. Because then if bishop takes, we could actually play rook takes, c7 attacking the queen. And so here, it takes, the queen would have to move back, then you take there, and I believe we're up a whole piece at that point. So potentially knight c4 is the idea. What it does is it breaks communication with the queen and rook, and this doesn't have two defenders anymore. It only has one, and Well, potentially maybe that would have to be played. Well, then we could play queen to a3 would be an interesting idea. And that should win a bishop. So if we played here, here, queen a3 forking the rook and the bishop. So, what do you guys think? Knight c4. See after here, there. See over here. Well, I guess we could play our rook up there and then have a cross pin. Well, you'd have to be careful that's hanging at that point. So, we'd have to be very careful of that knight. So how could we handle that? Well, after here, if he played there, oh, we have a fork here, my bad. So if here, here, back, forking the two, so this has to be the move. Because if the queen moves here, we'll say the queen moves back to attack there. You first actually take with the rook. And if he tries taking here, you can actually double up. Yeah, that's interesting because the bishop can't move. If it moves, then you actually back rank mate, and the queen's lost. So here, and then what would have to happen is bishop moves, then you win there. Yeah. Okay, well, okay, let's see. Okay, so whose turn is it? Oh, black. Okay, you're black. Gotcha. Gotcha. I'm not looking at the board. I'm not looking at this side, so I'm gonna try to see what black played here. What was white's move? That makes sense. That actually does make sense. Because if you think about it, what is this here? A pin. So The queen has to move. So guys, it tells you, don't get pawn greedy. Do whatever you do, don't get pawn greedy. Rook takes. And if you looked at the threat, you'd be like, yeah, it's like this. It's the coolest thing, guys. Yeah, it's cool because if you were just looking at the threat and not looking at the potential of the drawback to this move, what did the rook guard before it left its position? It guarded this pawn. So the queen and the rook guarded here, which this wouldn't actually be plausible or possible. So after takes there, now the drawback to this move is the queen's attacking it, but you're saying, wait, isn't the queen protecting it? Yes, but guess what? We get to trade. We pull the queen away, and when we pull the queen away, we win the rook. So this started with our idea, because we used drawback chess or Aikido. We were able to make a plan around this. Our plan was like what Fox said, pin and deflection. We saw that this rook left this pawn's protection behind, so we played here, there, and then we took here. Oh, yikes. Yep, there you go. Yep. You're right, that's worse. So in this scenario, guys, it's even worse. We can't actually take. So this is horrible. We're just gonna have to like move our king, and even if we and then at this point bishop takes and then rook takes, and this actually has to come to pass. It has to. That's the only move that has any that works, and it's then guess what you get to do. Oh, hello little rook. How nice you are to be on that file for us to have a little bit of fun. There's a flight square, so the black is totally crushing. Yeah. And there we go. That's an attack, so then the rook would have to come here. And at this point, you play there, 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 and it's checkmate. So there you go. Waiting more now, guys. With the engines that came out, it's all about lines of understanding. So, but principles still do apply. If you don't know like an idea, if you didn't know what to do after this move, you can then you can look at maybe a principal move like, what happens if I take here? Principal is a pin, and so if you know the principles of tactics, you can find that, which is actually crazy. So it's a cool move though. We'll do one more puzzle and then I got a log. That was an excellent puzzle tactic, Fox. That was cool. Yeah. Let's go on to we'll do one more. Oh, sweet. You gotta love this. Okie dokie. So he took a pawn. What did that move do? Some moves actually waste time, So a drawback is sometimes a waste of time, like our opponent taking this pawn, the e3 pawn, could potentially be a waste of time, which then we can use it, the time to our benefit. Let's see here. It also left behind, it wasted basically a move grabbing a pawn, and also left this rank behind. So potentially we could also put it on a file that we could attack too. So it allows that to happen, the bishop going there. This also is open for our position to enter. And then it was a waste of time. So how do we handle this? Well, we do have a potential attack on the knight, so we could potentially play. This is actually a threat here. I know that looks crazy. The queen moves there. Queen takes. Knight takes. Rook, but then rook slides over. I don't know if I like that. Yeah, so let's see, if we played queen f5, check. Check. Take. So I think that's it. Yeah. So we can't do that. Maybe if we play here, it comes down checks. It comes up. If he checks there, we come up. Check. There's checkmate. Let me go there. I think that's close to mate. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, then he could actually trade off, and I think he's better. Let's see here. Rook e7. Kind of like that. Yeah, I like this move. What do you guys think? That's a good move. What do you think? I think rook. I'm sure of rook e7. Are we gonna go with it? What do you guys think? Because I want you guys to party. Yep, let's do it. Now we take with check, and then we win the knight. So queen takes check, king takes, and then rook takes knight. I guess we have to play there, don't we? Let me see. Because then he's going to have to play here. That's crazy. Why doesn't he just play here? I think... Oh, I see why. Okay, I got a lot. Yeah. Let's check something out though. Let's see if queen f5 actually does lead to mate. Boom, there you go. Do you guys have any questions before I log on this right here? Do you guys have any lines that you want to go over? So rook e7, queen f. Okay. So what is the best line after rook e7? h6, queen check. Up there, check, king there, queen takes is an idea, and then takes, and you win a piece. So that's it. That's an idea. And you also now can protect this so that if there, you could take, and rook takes. There you go. Is that good? Did I answer everybody's question? Okay. So king f5. Oh, sorry. Here, king f5. Yeah, there. Oh, I gotcha. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, here. Let me see. Let me get. Let's get to our thing there. And then you're saying what happens if h6, queen there, h7. Oh, queen f5. King. Oh, we were talking about king h. Gotcha. I believe you just win here. And then if he tries to do, let's just do a bad move for him, okay? You won't be surprised what happens. Boom. And then what happens after it takes? Bang. And you win the queen. And it's mate and 8. Oh, whoa, that rhymes. Queen f7, h8, queen f5, king h. And then we take. And then, like what we said, if he does, we'll say he tries to, just push the pawn. We'll say pushing the pawn. He gets the surprise of his life. Smack. So he basically has to move, and then you attack the rook. Oh, okay, let's see. Right here. I believe that's covered at this point. And there's really no way to check, because if he checks here, we actually checkmate. This covers the checkmating square. Hey, how you doing? This covers the checkmating square. So he can't really do anything after this check. He could potentially go back, but then he lands right into a mate in 6. Oh, you're talking about queen takes? He's just walking up the board. Whoa. And he's safe. He's safe at that point. Yeah, it's like now we got our third piece evolved. We have enough pieces to checkmate the enemy king. Oh, not a problem. Hey, this was a great one to go over. There were so many ideas in it. So I think it was more than 2200. I believe this should have been like a 25 or 2600 level puzzle, but that's just me. Well, guys, and Fox, you asked me last night who I thought would kind of win. What you have to for the chess, I think it's in between Wesley and Sam and Varakobian. I think if Fabi plays good, though, I really think it's going to be a four-way tie for first in the men's world championship. But I truly believe if we're going to do the women's, I think Annie has a good shot and Nazi Pakinzi has a good shot. It might come down to those two players. I don't know about the other ones, but those two players are playing really strong right now. Arena's playing good too, but those two lady players are playing strong. So I'm thinking, it's just my opinion, those two, it may come down to those two women, Annie and Nazi, and I think it might be a 3 to 4 way tie. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think it's going to either come down to Kobian. I believe it might be these four. Um, Kobian, or Wesley, Kobian, Sam, and Fabi. I believe it's going to come down to those four. Yeah, he's a cool guy. I like his lectures. He's really they are really down to understandable for people to learn from, and he's a good teacher. So Kobian's cool. So whoever wins is cool. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Wesley's going to have to start pulling some wins if he wants to pull ahead. Sam is ahead today. He beat a Kobian. So, or I'll just call him Var. He beat Var today, so it's going to be interesting. Var's going to have to come up with a really good game tomorrow. So it's going to be cool. But I think it's going to be those four in the men's division: Kobian, no, Wesley, Sam, Fabi, and a Kobian. It's going to come down, in my opinion, to those four. But I just those four players are playing really, really strong. You know, VAR lost one, but it's not over. There's a lot more to come. So one out of I think 11 games is not a problem. So, well, okay, guys, I got a log, but I wanted to answer that question from last night. I got off a little too early. So, well, guys, keep studying, keep getting better, and remember, watch the chess championship. The ladies and the men's one are really, really good. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins on both sides. It's really tight now in both divisions. It's really tight. So it's going to be a pretty fun tournament. And remember, only look back to learn. Don't dwell on your mistakes. Learn from them so you're not doomed to repeat them again. Remember, there's always a plan to position. We just got to find it. When we find it, we get to say this one thing: I love it when a plan comes together. Well, guys, have a blessed rest of the night. And as Wesley So says, serve the Lord Jesus. And as I say, God bless. And I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. and I'll be on tomorrow. So have a great morning, evening, or night, and keep studying chess, guys. Bye bye.